Okay, we're just gonna make a start at this time. This is a recording of our live online session. I realized that we had a little bit of a short notice with setting up this. It was important for me, though, that you will get some kind of a live online session during this first week, even though we didn't have a chance to do surveying of everyone's availability to the as great extent as I would have liked. But moving forward on the coming weeks, I think that at the moment the plan is that we're going to keep these meetings on Wednesdays at 10:30 in the morning and then again on the afternoon at 5 o'clock. I normally try to keep these sessions to an hour or less in length. And obviously, these sessions are not required for you to attend. It's just a supplementary resource that I like to offer also for my asynchronous online students. So, couple of words about the plan for today. Really, what I want to do is just introduce you to the course. And I also want to spend a little bit of time going through some of the kind of housekeeping items to make sure that we're all working from the same place and we have the same idea of expectations for this course and how the course is going to map out. I also want to take a little bit of time to spend looking at the Canvas course where you'll be actually accessing most of your learning materials as well as show the publisher's assignment platform where you'll be completing many of the weekly assignments that I ask you to do. So that's the really broad strokes idea behind today's session and what I'm hoping to gain out of that. Please do remember that I always record these sessions. They are completely optional, so do not change your schedules. Do not change your life upside down to attend to these. I will try these times and days initially, and if later on we find out that this is not working for the most of the people, we might try other days, other times. But like I said, this is an optional resource, not required, just something that I think that many of my students in the past have found useful. So to start a little bit talking about what's coming up and what it is to take a online class, I normally like to do a little bit of introductions, but since this is going to be a recording, I'm going to skip over that. I do want you to know that I'm very much looking forward to getting to know you during this semester, and it is really important for me to understand what your goals for this class are. A lot of the time, most of my students are pursuing prerequisite classes for the nursing degree. But if there are any other interesting or fun paths that you're pursuing, please, please, please don't hesitate to let me know. It helps me to align the examples that I provide around those fields. I also thought that it'd be appropriate for very quickly for me to introduce myself. How did I end up here and what are we doing? I do want to share quickly that the best way to get hold of me is really through the Canvas messages. And to share how that works, I'm going to jump out of this presentation and I'm gonna share another screen of mine with you. At the moment, you should be, oh, let's not do that. Let me just jump out of that. At the moment, you should be, I believe, seeing the screen where my Canvas course is for this course. Obviously, your view will look a little bit different than it does for me as your instructor, but roughly the course will look something like that. And what I'm asking, I hope that it's showing up on your side again. So what I'm asking you to do is when you want to communicate with me, is that you use the Canvas's inbox. You'll find it on the left-hand side of the screen on that blue bar. And from there, you can send a message to me. From there, I will respond to your messages. And it really is the quickest and easiest way for making sure that you hear back from me. I normally try to respond within 24 hours or so. If you don't hear back from me within that amount of time, I will then please do feel free to resend the message. But the Canvas messages is the best way to get hold of me. So I'm going to jump back to the presentation that I had open, and welcome for anyone who's joining us. So let me share my screen again. Words that might be helpful. Sometimes students are curious to know how I ended up doing what I'm doing, what's the plan. My background is really in medical imaging field. I've done a lot of research on the field, developing new methods and new MRI imaging techniques, especially as it relates to the heart. So clinical research, that all is my background, where I come from. Before career clinical research, I did work, though, extensively in the field of conservation restoration, so mainly working with archaeological objects from excavation sites, including human remains. And that's really the path that took me to the medical field and understanding the anatomy of the human body. However, since I moved to America, I have been teaching in various different schools, including a private medical imaging school and private nursing school. And now I'm here at the community college sphere, which I really think is a good fit for my ideology of making education available and affordable for more people. So I'm very, very excited and very grateful to be part of the community college system. The best way really to kind of approach what's to be expected is probably, if I was a student, I'd be curious, what are the assignments that are asked from me for this week? And this week I asked you to complete a syllabus quiz, and I want to give a thank you for everyone who submitted it. It was due at the end of the day yesterday. It carries few points towards your final grade, but most importantly, it's the tool that I use to ensure that you don't get dropped from this class for non-attendance during the first week's drop process. Moving forward, most of the deadlines are going to be at the end of the week for each week, and typically we cover one chapter per week, with the exception of those weeks when we are doing testing. So for this week, we are starting with chapter 1 of the textbook, and I have 2 assignments that I'm asking you to complete. And obviously, I'm not just asking you to do the assignments, I'm also asking you to use your textbook to study the chapter 1 material. In addition to that, I offer ample resources on the Canvas course, kind of like the highlights or key points of that chapter. Unfortunately, we don't have resources or time to go through everything on those pre-recorded lectures, but they give a pretty robust idea of the biggest takeaway messages from that chapter. For this chapter 1, I'm asking you to complete a quiz and a practice anatomy activity. It is basically a quiz, but it just looks as anatomical structures and very visual kind of an activity. And I'm asking you to complete those by the end of the week. The assignments are completed on our publisher's platform, Connect. So when you click on that assignment, and I'll show you the view on the Canvas course in just a few moments, but when you click on that assignment, it will automatically link you. You should have automatically access to the publisher's resources, to these quizzes, and you complete them there, and it will update automatically on your gradebook here on the Canvas. I ask you to try to stick to the due dates, but I realize that it's not always possible. If you sometimes need an extension, if you need extra time, don't hesitate to reach out to me. More often than not, I will totally do that. Only times when I'm a little hesitant about doing extensions is when we're doing testing, so exams or practical exams. So moving forward, really the format for the course is that each week the kind of deliverables from you that count towards your course are to complete a quiz, complete a practice anatomy, and occasionally I either have food for thought assignments or I have recently added to this course also little virtual labs. We don't have a huge number of those, but there are a few of those. I'm kind of wanting more of your feedback, whether they're useful, how they're working. But unfortunately, the topics that we cover on this course do not have a lab in a virtual setting for every single week and every single chapter. But those are typically the assignments that I'm looking for. On this course, we will be also completing 3 exams and 3 practical tests. Exams are basically based on the quiz questions that you complete each week. So that's another reason why completing those quizzes is so useful. And same goes for the practical tests. So it's going to be pulled largely from those questions that you complete on a weekly chapter practice anatomy assignments. When we have tests, I've tried to make it very manageable for that week. I'm really asking you to focus only on the exam and practical. There's no new study material. You can take the tests from home, and we'll talk more about their format once we get closer to the first test. There is no cumulative final exam. I should mention that as well. Like I said, I've scheduled, and I'm sorry I have a spelling error there or an error there. It should be 10:30, not 1:30. That would be a little too extra. So what I have scheduled at the moment for our meetings is at the 10:30 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon for the Wednesdays. But I know that everyone didn't have a chance to provide their input on their preferred days and availabilities. At the same time, I do have a very busy teaching load, including a lot of in-person teaching this semester, so finding that optimal time might be challenging, but please do remember that I will always offer a recording of these meetings. So if you're not able to make it in person, that will be made available for you as well. I do not expect you to attend, change your plans, but I'm very, very happy if you wish to attend. And it's really kind of an extension of office hours, a chance for you to ask questions, or if you don't have any questions, I just usually provide kind of a nutshell summary of what we covered that week in terms of the learning material. Best way to access those, a lot of the students find, is using the calendar link on your Canvas course on that blue left-hand side banner. There should be a link to each of these meetings. I wanted to show really quickly what we're covering on this course as well. So we will spend the first week really talking about general terms of the body, directions, how we use body planes, body systems, different regions of the body, just kind of getting that basic language of anatomy and physiology. The second week that we have together focuses on discussing different tissues. That should be largely a revision from your prereq classes. And then I have kind of 1 week which I will not test you on beyond the weekly assignments. It's not going to be in the exams, but we'll kind of do a crash course of your earlier, and let me just see that earlier, crash course of your earlier prerequisite classes. So we'll have a look of the chemistry of life, cells, and then genetics. But it's more of just to make sure that we all are at the same place in terms of the understanding of these themes as we embark on this course. The first actual system that we'll have a look of is going to be our integumentary system, so the skin and associated structures such as glands, hair, nails, and so on, after which we will do kind of an introductory week to the skeletal system. So we'll have a look of general things about the bone, general things about cartilages, and then take our first exam and first practical. Following that, once you've completed that first exam, that will be the only time that you get tested on that material. Like I said, I don't do a cumulative final exam. We move on to the next set of chapters for this course, and we'll have a look of skeleton. We'll go through all of the major bones of the body and all of the major parts of the bones of the body. We'll also talk about different kinds of articulations, so joints of the body. We'll have a look of kind of an introduction to the muscles, and then go through most important skeletal muscles of the body before spending another week looking at testing what we have learned about these themes, and completing also a practical test. The very final set of chapters for this course that we'll focus on really focus on your nervous system. So we'll start by introductions to that. We'll have a look of central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, autonomic nervous system, and then some special senses before wrapping up the semester by taking our final exam and final practical. I wanted to direct your attention to the syllabus that I have prepared for this course. And with the syllabus, you will find that when you click onto the concourse syllabus, it will open a document which is a PDF file and goes through pretty much all of the most important questions that I get from the students. So I would really encourage you to check that out. And if you don't find an answer, then please do reach out to me. But most answers are there in the syllabus available for you. That is a useful and very worthwhile document. I have recently this semester heard that few students have had hard time accessing the syllabus, especially if they use iPad. So if you're not able to open the syllabus for some reason, please do not hesitate to reach out to me and I will send it to you as a PDF document, just as an individual message. I do want you to have that available because that really contains our schedule, for example, all different kinds of assignments, grade distribution, and so on and so on. So it's really a worthwhile document to have an access to. Like I said earlier on, most of the homework, not all, but most of the homework on this course is actually completed at our publisher's web platform, which is known as a Connect. Through Connect, you will be also able to access electronic version of the textbook, and this is what you already have an access simply by being enrolled to this class. So I really encourage you to make sure that you're able to access this resource. Very rarely are there times when students are unable to access that, but if that is the case, I would rather troubleshoot and solve those situations now, early in the semester, rather than waiting later on down the line. So I want to make sure that you're able to do all of the homework and it doesn't pile up because of that. I do have few assignments as well that you'll be completing on the Canvas, and it is within the Canvas where you'll be also completing your exams and practical tests. I wanted to take a couple of minutes just to mention really importantly about one of the topics that I discuss on the syllabus that I think is a really important one. I want to remind everyone and myself that disabilities come in many different shapes and forms, and not all disabilities are immediately visually observable. So it doesn't have to be a physical disability that's a striking one. We do have other things that could also qualify as a disability, such as dyslexia, extreme exam anxiety, and so on and so on. So if you have had an accommodation plan at the high school, or you have medical documentation of a condition that might impact your studying or testing performance, I would really encourage you to get hold of our Disability Resource Services department. They're wonderful at having those discussions with you and finding out what we can do to make sure that you have a good learning experience here. I personally, as an instructor, will never be notified about your disability. I will simply be notified if they grant you an accommodation plan, that what those accommodations are. And often it might be things like additional testing time, or additional time for submitting assignments, and so on and so on. I do want to make a caveat and also highlight that short-term disabilities are also a thing. So if you have something that happens in your life that might impact your ability to perform on this class, again, I would encourage you to seek advice from this department. They really are wonderful people and able to help with a lot of things. Um, my commitment to you in this class is to make sure that if you're putting in the effort, I will totally match that effort. So by that, I mean that if your grade isn't exactly where you want it to be and you're nervous about that, please reach out to me. Please, let's discuss about that. And earlier you do it, easier it is for me to work with you to address those concerns. Last thing I want is for anyone to be struggling in quiet. I am fully committed on helping you every step of the way. But in order for me to be able to help you, I need to know if you need help. So please, please, please reach out to me and let me know how I can be of an assistance. This is usually where I finish this kind of an introductory talk about what's involved with this course. At any time, feel free if you're attending in synchronous format, just unmute yourself and shout out if you have a question or drop it to the chat. If you wish to ask questions and don't want to have that recorded, since I'm recording these sessions for also those students who are unable to join me in live setting, just let me know and I'll pause the recording for that time and we'll reconvene once we have addressed your individual questions. But I'm going to jump out of this screen and I want to share another screen of mine with you. So let's just get that open. Give me a second. And right now, you should be seeing my Canvas course. And let me just zoom out a little bit. Like I said, it's going to look a little different for you than it does for me, but it's going to be fairly similar to what you're seeing here. So let's have a look at what we need to know about our Canvas course. This is really where everything in terms of the learning materials, in terms of links to the assignment, and so on are housed. So you'll see that I've divided the course into learning modules, one per week, and in each learning module, we typically cover one chapter at a time. I asked you to complete the syllabus quiz. If you didn't get a chance to do so yet, please do so. But you'll find on each learning module also a bunch of other things. You'll find, for example, the intended learning outcomes for that week, what it is that I want you to know, what are the key things that I want you to be familiar with from that chapter's material. You'll also find that I've recorded a lot of short lecture videos about the various different topics. So if you don't enjoy reading textbook and you want to have a little bit more of a visual review of the material, these videos are here available for you. They don't unfortunately cover absolutely everything, but they can cover a large amount of the things that we talk about. The chapter numbers that I marked on these videos might differ a little bit from your course book. I'm having to rely on some previous videos, but I'll be updating those as we get along. You'll also see that I have sometimes short videos that explain like the key points of a simple concept in a visual manner and then provides a written description of that concept as well. So those are some of the things that you'll find on the learning modules. You'll also sometimes get to visit me in a classroom. So I have recorded little videos from the classroom where I talk you through some of the themes. And you'll also see that I have a lot of time the lecture PowerPoint available for you. Some students find it very useful to have that resource available. So this is all for you for learning about that week's material. But what I'm expecting to get back from you is really the homework assignments. And for this first week, I have two homework assignments, like I said. I have chapter one quiz and I have chapter one practice anatomy. Both are due 1 minute before the midnight on Sunday night, and both carry points towards your final grade. And what I was going to do next, I was going to spend a little bit of time showing you what to expect on those quizzes. Some weeks I have, in addition to the quiz and practice anatomy, I might have a food for thought assignment, which is really a mini essay about one paragraph in length where you answer to a prompt that I ask you to talk about. And usually I do provide you materials in that week's learning module that will help you and guide you. So they're usually much more application-based questions of the material that we cover. I do also occasionally have simulations, like I said, kind of virtual labs for you to get a little bit of more immersive experience what it would be to be in a face-to-face class. Unfortunately, I don't have those for everything, and they don't carry a huge amount of points this semester since I'm trying them out for the first time. I'm very curious to hear about your experience, whether you like them or not. Final thing that you can see sometimes on these learning modules is that I provide additional handouts. These are typically handouts that I would use in a classroom when I'm teaching about the very same topic. Usually they are related to these lecture videos that I provide you, so they might be similar materials that I'm referring to on those. Unfortunately, I don't have handouts on every chapter, but most chapters I have good handouts, and if you feel like some handout would be handy and I haven't provided it for you, let me know. I probably have it one in my storage and I will gladly upload it. Final thing that I wanted to show from the learning modules is that for every learning module, I also have additional material available. This is completely optional material. I'm not requiring you to complete it. It's just there for those students who want to go above and beyond and have further interests outside what's covered in the lecture videos and outside what's covered in your textbook. So there's first a page where I provide a short summary of the topic. I provide the key concepts kind of as a bullet point list, some thinking questions, additional reading of the reputable sources, and critical thinking and clinical application questions. You are not required to complete these, but if you were eager and you wanted to complete them, you can complete those and submit them to me at the next area. So you can just write it on a Word document or you can write it on an answer field or however you wish. And if you submit it to me, I will give you extra credit for that. So there's many ways to collect those points that count towards your final grade. But this is an additional resource that I just provide for those students who are very, very eager to go above and beyond. Now, at this time, I wanted to check whether there are any questions. Again, feel free to just jump in and let me know if you have questions. If you do not have any questions, what I wanted to do next was to discuss a little bit about how do those homework quizzes and practice anatomies work. So you will be clicking on one of these and it will automatically direct you to the publisher's webpage. If it is the first time that you're using the Macro Hills resources, it might require you to register, but you shouldn't have to pay anything. You shouldn't have to buy access codes. It's all included in your enrollment to this class. So just because my way of accessing this, since I'm a teacher, differs a little bit from you, I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a second so that I can actually go back and get to the same view where you would do. So bear with me. So again, my view might be slightly different since I'm an instructor, but it's going to be very, very similar. So let me share my view. So this is where you will be able to access your textbook. And this textbook is a completely electronic textbook. So you'll be able to look at each chapter, jump around there, even search within the textbook things that you're interested in and gain kind of understanding of what we're trying to learn. I think that these expected learning outcomes are super useful as you are trying to figure out that what do I want to get out of reading this chapter. Also, like I said, you can search if you're seeking for an answer, if you're having hard time finding something that you're learning about, but answers of that. And at the very end of your textbook, there's a really nice glossary as well. A lot of the time, students are finding new terms, new words as we're studying, and this glossary will allow you to make sure that you don't have to battle with trying to understand words that are strange or new for you. So let me just jump back to the assignments that we'll be completing. And again, just give me a second. I don't want to share other students' details. I'll get it opened. And here we go. So the assignments often look something like this. And on this one, it's somehow not laying out the way I would want. So let's see if we can do it again. So typically in an assignment, and this should be a full-sized screen, you have in this particular quiz 9 questions, and the questions are very interactive in nature. So for example, on this quiz, you are being asked to place each of the labels into the proper category. So I'm asking whether what you're being asked is more anatomy or whether it's more physiology. So you remember that anatomy was the study of the structure of the body, whereas physiology was the study of the function of the body. So study of the form would fall within the anatomy, whereas study of the function to the physiology. Here's some examples that would be also a good example. So here it says that each of the kidneys contains approximately 6 to 7 renal pyramids. That's all an anatomical description of a kidney. So it would be definitely an example of anatomy. Whereas a description where it says that cellular energy requires the body's production of ATP is much more physiology. It's how body works. So you will complete dragging these boxes or these statements to the right boxes. Another example here is that the human heart is comprised of 4 chambers. That's an anatomical description of the heart. Whereas if we look at a physiological example, we have here that skeletal muscles contract, so how they work, how they act, by a process called sliding filament theory. And we will talk about sliding filament theory later on this course, but this gives you an idea that are we talking about purely description of structures, or are we talking about explaining how functions happen? Another example of anatomy, the brachial artery gives rise to the ulnar and radial arteries. So really explaining the structure of the blood vessels and what blood vessel divides into what. An example of physiology, glucose, a form of simple carbohydrates, is the necessary fuel for the brain. So we're looking how brain works, what brain uses as an energy for its functions. So that's going to be physiology. For anatomy, the brain is composed of two hemispheres, very descriptive of the structure of the uh, of the body part, in this case of the brain. Whereas if we have a statement, heart cells are capable of contracting on their own due to property called autorhythmicity, that's a description of how something works. So that would be physiology. And the final one that we're seeing here, mitochondria are cellular organelles that are more numerous in active cells. That's really just a description of the structure. It doesn't talk about physiology, whereas the long-term acid-base balance of the body is controlled by the kidneys. Really tells you how something works, so it's going to be more physiology. So that's the format how these quizzes work. Obviously, I would prefer that the screen was a little bit bigger. Here I have a question that relates to the homeostasis, and you'll learn about homeostasis on the lecture videos that I provide for you. But homeostasis is essentially how we maintain body's conditions consistent, how we stay in the state of equilibrium. And there's two ways how homeostatic mechanism loop can work, either through positive or negative feedback. And here I'm asking which one are these examples of. So negative feedback is what happens most of the time in the body. So when something changes, it gets detected, you get processed compared to what the normal value for that should be. And if it's off from that normal, we act on that, trying to bring that change back into the normal body condition. This is known as negative feedback when we stop a change from happening. Most processes in the body are through negative feedback. I can only think of 3 examples when we see positive feedback. Positive feedback is when a change happens, and rather than stopping that change from happening, when body detects that change happening, it actually helps that change to happen even more. So this could be, for example, during childbirth, when the baby's head is pushing on the uterus as it's coming out. This causes us to receive a message from the receptors, stretch receptors at the uterus to the brain that, hey, uterus is being stretched. And rather than trying to stop that, now we send a signal that pushes the baby out more towards the uterus and through the uterus. So we're kind of amplifying the effect that we saw. So that would be an example of positive feedback. We also see positive feedback during lactation. So the baby suckling a nipple causes us to release milk, bring milk to the surface, which will likely cause the baby to suckle that nipple even more. So it's again adding to the effects. So it's kind of promoting this change to happen. And final example would be blood clotting or scab formation. So let's have a look at what we have here. We're being asked about the positive feedback. Some terms that you sometimes see with positive feedback is that this produces in a climatic event. By that, we're meaning simply that it adds to the change that's already happening. So the feedback is increasing or amplifying or magnifying the process that started, like we saw. And then we have a few examples here. I think that this is not really an anatomy and physiology example. It's just a kind of a theoretical example. But if you have good grades in the school, then you will feel great about that and you will get a lot of praises and you want to pursue more of those grades. So it would be positive feedback. You're wanting to do more of that because of that change. Similarly, we talked about the childbirth. So we have an example of that as a positive feedback, the stretch of the cervix, and then the clotting of the blood and the scab formation. All others really are examples of negative feedback that we find in the body. So negative feedback, like I said, it's much more common. In this case, the feedback really kind of tries to rectify the situation and bring us back to that ideal situation. So it's really all about stopping that change from happening, reversing a trend. Some examples that we have here of negative feedback is if we have decreasing blood pressure, that would cause widespread vasoconstriction. So if blood pressure is dropping, the blood vessels start to squeeze the blood inside there, which then would bring up the blood pressure. So we're stopping that change from happening, which was blood pressure dropping. Now we're doing some sort of a physiological response to bring us back to that starting point. Another example that's being asked in this question is decreasing levels of blood calcium cause parathyroid hormone to be released, resulting in increased level of calcium. So again, we're seeing a change. The calcium levels are dropping, and responding to that through the process of homeostasis and through the process of negative feedback is to stop that change from happening. So we're bringing the calcium levels back. So hence it would be negative feedback. Let's see what other questions we have on this week's quiz. We have a question of where you look at animation and then you test your knowledge about that. So we're being asked whether it's true or false that positive feedback loop causes self-amplifying cycle where physiological change leads even greater change. So you remember positive feedback was when something was happening, the change was happening, and we make that change happen even more. That was rare. There were 3 times when that happened: childbirth, lactation, and the scab formation, blood clot forming. So this would be true, this statement. There's another true false statement. Negative feedback is a process where we stop the change from happening. We're reversing the change, and that sounds true to me as well. So that's really the format of how these quiz questions work. Again, I have another question where you'll be dragging the correct label or statements under the correct boxes, whether it's anatomy or whether it's physiology. So this is more examples of descriptions, and you have to see whether it's anatomy, in which case it would be describing a structure of a body, like the bronchi and alveoli are part of the lower respiratory tract. That describes how the actual structure is constructed, how respiratory tree is constructed. Whereas physiology, how body works, we're seeing that when we talk about insulin and glucagon, which maintain normal blood sugar levels. So this is much more how body works, not structures, but how body works. So physiology. And same goes for all of these other statements. I'm not going to read through those. You will have a chance to practice yourself, but that just gives you an idea of what to anticipate. Sometimes some of the quiz questions are questions where you will be filling in blanks. So for example, in this, I have a statement for you. Most anatomical terms can be traced back to, and then there's a bleep and bleep. So I'm asking, to what languages can anatomical terms be traced back to? And we will end up seeing that anatomical terms are often originate from the language of Greek or from the Latin, ancient Latin. So those are really languages that come up a lot when we are studying the anatomical terminology. There's another multiple choice question. What is the study of body structures called? That's anatomy. You remember study of functions was physiology. There are other options that are not relevant to what we've learned so far. Here you're being asked to label appropriate body systems. So you're being shown different systems, and then you're being asked to drag these blue boxes on top of the right ones. So we're seeing examples of digestive system. So the digestive organs, what's located in the gut area, liver, stomach, large intestine, small intestines, and so on. Integumentary system, so the skin, the glands, associated structures. We're seeing here endocrine system, so the glands that produce hormones. We're seeing muscular system, so often those big skeletal muscles. We'll spend a whole week later on this semester looking at those. And then we have an example here of lymphatic system. Lymphatic system is a very fascinating system, and we'll talk more about that on BIO202, I believe. So that gives you an idea of what kind of questions you can expect. Here we go back to the homeostatic feedback loop where we're seeing something. So here, for example, receptor was detecting something that's happening. It's passing the message to the control center or integrating center where we had a set point. And finally, we act to stop that change from happening. So these kind of mixture of multiple choice, drag the box questions, that's what you'll find on the quizzes. And like I said, you can just complete it online. The grades will automatically update on your Canvas course, and you have multiple chances to complete those if you don't get the grade that you want. I only look at the best grade that you can get. For the practice anatomy, let's have a look of what we can see with that. So with the practice anatomy here, often it is pictures, often it is anatomical structures, but since on the first chapter we don't have as many anatomical structures, I'm actually having some questions where we have other types of questions as well. So here I'm asking you to place the single word into each sentence to correctly describe the anatomical position. So you remember anatomical position was when you stood flat with your feet on its sides, hands on the side, palms facing forward, looking forward, kind of the standard reference how we think of the body to have kind of a shared understanding of the body position. So here we are seeing that the statement is in bleep position, the subject stands. So then you would drag that the word anatomical to complete that in an anatomical position, subject would be standing. Other sentence reads that the subject's feet are flat on the floor and close together, arms at their side with what facing forward? Well, again, you would drag the word palms there to show that it's the palms that are facing forward. So really making sense of those statements. Similarly, we are seeing this position provides a precise and standard frame of reference for description and what? Well, we also use anatomical position when we dissect catheters. So it's kind of a standard position where we put that body. So that might be a good way of thinking of it. Another statement here says that unless otherwise stated, all anatomical descriptions refer to the anatomical what? And it would be again anatomical position. So we normally, when we talk about anatomy and physiology, we assume that the patient, that the subject would be standing in an anatomical position. If it's something off from that, we will make a note of that. But that gives you an idea of what kind of questions to expect there. Let's have a look of another example. Here we have body planes that we're seeing, and you're being asked to again drag the labels to show the correct plane. So let's start with the frontal plane. Frontal plane runs separating your front and back. So it runs from one side to another, giving you front side and back side, kind of separating you midways on this plane. Another word that sometimes is being used when you talk about that is a coronal plane. I often think of it when you take a crown and you put it on your head where your hands would be going down. That's the coronal plane. So frontal plane and coronal plane are synonyms. They just simply give us a front and they give us a back side of the body. Sometimes another plane that you'll end up seeing is known as our sagittal plane. Sagittal plane runs this way, separating your body into right and left side. So it can be mid-sagittal plane, which runs bang on in the middle, or it can be off from the mid-sagittal plane, but it still gives you your right and left side of the body. Then we have also our transverse plane. Transverse plane cuts you in half, but now separating you to the top part and bottom part of your body. They're sometimes also referred as a horizontal plane. So both words are being used to describe that. So again, you would drag the right answer to the picture and answer that question based on that. Here I'm asking you to label different regions of the external anatomy. So we're seeing for example, facial region, we're seeing cervical region, we're seeing sternal region, pectoral region. Often these names are either from the bones or the muscles that are located on this area. Umbilical region is where your umbilical cord would be going. So umbilical cord leaves the remnant in an adult of the belly button. Abdominal, where your abdominal muscles would be found. So it's really just a way for you to practice what you're learning. I have a lot of good material, for example, those body regions as handouts on this week's lecture material. So that might come in handy as you're studying that. A few other terms, we're seeing the cervical region again, we're seeing upper limb, we're seeing thoracic region, abdominal region, and pubic region. And finally, pedal is the foot region. So it just gives you an idea of the types of things where you get to apply what you just learned in this week's learning material. There are some further body regions that I'm asking for example, inguinal, so the groin region, patellar, where the patella, the kneecap bone would be, dorsum, tarsal region, femoral region, and so on and so on. So really, again, this is a chance for you to apply what you've been reading about, what you've been looking handouts about, and kind of make use of your knowledge. Here you're being asked to label regions of external anatomy from the posterior side, and we're seeing, for example, interscapular, between the scapulas, and scapular, so the shoulder blades. We can also see cranial, so the skull region. Brain is located within the cranial cavity, and we're seeing vertebral region, so where your vertebral column would run. So giving you idea what to expect. On this particular practice anatomy, I have 16 questions. Again, this next one is going to be click and drag one, looking at the major body cavities. So body is made of cavities. On the posterior side, we do see cranial cavities, so that's where the brain is housed inside the skull, and vertebral canal running within the vertebral column where the spinal cord runs in. We're seeing thoracic cavity that houses lungs, heart, great vessels, diaphragm, which is that thin sheet of muscle that separates thoracic and abdominal cavity, and abdominal cavity where we find, for example, your intestines, stomach, liver, all that good stuff. Finally, pelvic cavity within the pelvic region, that's where we'll find, for example, your urinary bladder, and so on and so on. Moving onwards on the practical, here you're dragging to, again, labels. We're seeing from the anterior side of the body. Let's start with the thoracic cavity, and you can see the thoracic cavity. So the chest cavity is divided into sub-regions. Pleural cavity is where the lungs are going to be located. Mediastinum is the middle part where the heart and the great vessels are, and that's surrounded by pericardial cavity. So heart is surrounded by a sac-like connective tissue layer. We're seeing again the diaphragm that separated the thoracic from abdominal cavity, and we're seeing the pelvic cavity that we just talked about earlier on. Let's have a look at what else can we come up with. Here you're dragging labels to the proper position to identify the cavity that is referred to. So what's housed in the cranial cavity, that's going to be the brain, and then it's also a description of what happens there, not just anatomy. So mental function, thinking processes where brain processes things, that's where those are all housed within the skull, inside within the cranial cavity. Thoracic thoracic cavity, the boundary of that, the inferior boundary, so the bottom boundary of thoracic cavity is going to be diaphragm, that thin sheet of muscle separating thoracic from abdominal cavity. This houses, for example, your lungs and heart. There's a sub-region within the thoracic cavity known as mediastinum, where the heart and great vessels were located. Let's have a look of the abdominal cavity. This is where the organs of digestion are housed. Boundary, pelvic girdle, liver is found here, and kidneys are found there. Notice how now on this one, abdominal cavity and pelvic cavity are combined together. So we talk about abdominopelvic cavity. So there's few ways of phrasing things, and it really is just reading what you're being asked. Here you're being asked that which of the following statements are true regarding anatomical position, and the true answers would be subject's toes are pointing towards the observer and the subject is facing to the observer. There's some distractor answers that are not correct regarding this statement. Another one asking statements regarding directional terms, and there's going to be multiple correct ones. So the sternum, so your chest bone, is anterior to the spine. So remember, spine, your vertebral column, housed within the vertebral column, is located more posterior, whereas anterior. So at the front, we're going to find sternum. The shoulder is proximal to the elbow. So proximal means closer to the body, the trunk. So shoulder is much more closer to the trunk than your elbow. So that statement would be true. Umbilicus, so the belly button is inferior to the chin. And that is true, it's below the chin. So this allows you to practice these terms: anterior for front, posterior for the back, superior for the top, inferior to the bottom, medial, close to midline, lateral, far away from midline, proximal, close, and especially when we're talking about limbs, or distal, far away from the trunk, and so on and so on. So this is really ways for you to practice what you've been learning. Another one here is going to be a statement: the cranial cavity and the vertebral canal contain the central nervous system. So central nervous system, so your brain and your spinal cord are housed within the cranium and vertebral canal. Here you're being asked to label the directional terms based on the directions of the arrows. So we're seeing on this example, on this patient, we have anterior pointing to the front side of the patient, posterior pointing to the back side of the patient. We're seeing deep going far inside the body, whereas superficial would be close to the surface of the body. And so on and so on. So these are really chances for you to practice. I think there's a couple of more here. Medial means close to the midline of the body, whereas lateral means away from the midline of the body. We see proximal, especially in limbs. Proximal is close to the trunk, whereas distal is going to be far away from the trunk. So really chances for you to utilize what you've been learning and demonstrate that. Here we're seeing a picture and we're being asked what structure, what cavity is highlighted. This is going to be our cranial cavity. So inside the skulls, that area. So all kinds of more visually oriented questions. Here we're being asked what's the name of the highlighted body plane, and we're seeing here transverse plane cutting us into upper and lower portion. It could be also horizontal plane, but they don't give you that option, so it's gonna be only the transverse plane. So that should give you an idea of what kind of questions might come up, what you're being asked to do. I hope that helps. I hope that puts your mind at ease of what to expect for this week. And that really, let me just jump back in, concludes everything that I had planned to share with you. during this session. I'm always available to answer any questions. So even if you're taking an online class and it's an asynchronous class, it doesn't mean that you're doing it alone. I'm here to help. Like I said, I offer quite a bit of office hours. They're all listed in the syllabus that we just had a look of earlier on. So I think my office hours are on Monday and Wednesday mornings. And in addition, I offer these review sessions for anyone who wants to join or watch the recording afterwards on Wednesdays, 10:30 in the morning and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll also notice from the syllabus, since I have it open, that I have a listing of all kinds of assignments that might come up. So you can kind of have an idea of what I'm looking for them, how the points for those assignments are distributed. And you'll also see that you only need 90% or more to get an A in this class. It doesn't matter whether you have 99 points in a percent or you have 95% or 91%, it's still an A. Like I said, I will offer chances to collect extra credit points as well. If your grade just by taking the assignments isn't landing where you want, feel free to submit those extra credit assignments. I'm happy to reward points for those. And there might be other ones that I come up during the semester. Another thing that many people enjoy from the syllabus, many students find useful, is this schedule, course calendar, where I list every single assignment that I'm asking you to do, and I'm also showing when it's due. Remember, we proceed through modules on this course, and each module represents 1 week. I have opened all of the modules for your convenience already at this part of the semester. However, I'm not expecting you to work ahead, but if you happen to know that you have, for example, travel or other commitments coming up and you want to work ahead, you are absolutely welcome to do so. But what I ask is that you try to keep up with the due dates, that you don't fall behind. But like I said, if you fall behind, reach out to me. We can have a discussion on a case-by-case basis that could we extend the due dates. I'm really not as eager to extend due dates for the exams and practical exams. I'm trying to think what else could I share with you about the materials. Nothing stands out to me drastically, but as always, if you have questions that come up, do let me know. Like you see, there's no cumulative final exam. It is exams for the previous chapters that we covered. Obviously, I do reserve a right to make changes if necessary on the courses. Sometimes things arise. I'm pretty eager to get your feedback, so I often survey my students, and based on those answers, I sometimes do changes based on the comments that I hear. If students are struggling or finding something too easy or whatever, I try to adjust the course to meet those needs. Final thing that I wanted to say is that really you will need to have some sort of an internet access and computer to complete a lot of these assignments. If for some reason, for example, you wouldn't have an access to a computer, I don't want you to have to try to do these things on a mobile phone or otherwise, because it normally isn't that great for the pictures especially. I would rather encourage you to go and check out a laptop for a semester. We as a college loan those through the library. It's first come, first served. So go there and grab yourself a laptop for a loan for the semester if you feel that you need one. That really concludes all that I had planned for this session. As always, I'm available here for questions. Don't hesitate to reach out, but I will wrap it up here for now. We will meet next time in synchronous optional live online session next week on Wednesday, either at the morning at 10:30 or in the afternoon at 5 o'clock. I will keep an eye if there's other requests of times and days. I will be more than happy to move around the the meeting times. Like I said, I do have a fairly busy schedule, but based on my availability, I want to make sure that you have a chance to attend. But remember, these are not required. And if you do choose to rather watch a recording, or you don't feel that they're really necessary for you, that's totally fine as well. I hope you have a really good first week of the classes. Don't hesitate to reach out to me even outside office hours. Use the Canvas messages. I am usually very, very responsive there, and I'm usually very, very willing to organize even a time for us to meet, whether it's remotely or in person, even outside my office hours. As long as you let me know, we'll find a time that works for both of us. And that concludes our session today. I'm going to stop recording now, and I hope you have a very good rest of the week. Remember, I'm here. I'm very, very eager to help if there's anything that I can assist with. And really, my goal with this course is to make it low stress, relaxing, so you can focus on learning and enjoying rather than stressing over things. For now, thank you and bye bye.